It was a slow Thursday evening when I decided to make my usual weekend trip to Target. I've always had a bit of a spending problem there, unable to resist the siren call of shiny new things beckoning from the shelves. Even when I don't have anything particular in mind to buy, I find myself wandering the aisles, dreaming up ways to fill my barren apartment with touches of life. On this night, my eyes fell upon a display of board games, conjuring images of lively game nights, with friends gathered around my scratched-up coffee table, laughter and easy conversation filling the emptiness. I reached out to examine a box, contemplating which games might go over well, when an unexpected voice rang out behind me. "Psst," I startled, nearly knocking over the tower of games. Whipping around, I spotted a scrawny, middle-aged man staring at me intently from the next aisle over. Our eyes locked, and to my surprise, he lifted his hand in an eager wave, a wide grin splitting his gaunt face. I quickly averted my gaze, pulse racing. Just some weirdo, no need to engage. I turned and hastened away, unnerved by his unwarranted attention. Slipping into the home goods section, I browsed through picture frames, thinking some new decor could spruce up my dreary living room walls. As I pondered over frame sizes and styles, weighing their potential merits, that same reedy voice rang out once more. "Psst." I looked up to see the man had followed me, now lurking much closer than before. His grin remained fixed upon his face as he repeated the odd gesture, waving with almost childlike enthusiasm. Unease churned within me. I shot him my best threatening glare before pointedly turning my back, hoping the universal "leave me alone" signal would deter him. But I could feel his eyes boring into me as I moved down the aisle. I spent the next hour evading the man's pursuit, catching glimpses of him tracking my movements around the store. His hunched form and oversized jacket made him look small and unassuming from a distance, but his unwavering attention betrayed a more sinister intent. I considered leaving, but couldn't bring myself to abandon my cart full of carefully selected purchases. Finally, the pressure in my bladder could no longer be ignored. I made a beeline for the restroom, seeking temporary refuge within its walls. At least I could relieve myself without the creep's prying eyes. Settling onto the toilet inside the stall, I breathed a shaky sigh, the tension in my shoulders loosening slightly. But just as I finished up, the creak of the restroom door shattered my momentary peace. I froze, listening intently to the shuffling footsteps entering the room. "Psst." My blood turned to ice in my veins. The scrawny man's reedy voice was right outside my stall. I looked up to see a phone camera lens peeking through the door's crack, recording me in my exposed state. A scream tore from my throat as I desperately grabbed for toilet paper to cover myself. The man let out a chilling, hyena-like laugh, his camera flashing before his footsteps pounded away, fleeing the scene. For a moment I just sat there, stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Hands shaking violently, I managed to make myself decent before stumbling from the stall on coltish legs. Trembling uncontrollably, I called for help. 2 female employees entered and guided me to a chair, while another went to find their manager. Shock had rendered me nearly inarticulate, but I managed to explain what had occurred between gasping sobs. The violation I felt under this sinister stranger's watchful eye shook me to my core. Soon I was seated in the back office with the manager, a stern but sympathetic woman named Holly. She had a styrofoam cup of tea brought to me, coaxing me to drink in soothing tones as she asked for a full account of the incident. I described everything: the man's first approach in the game Isla, his persistent trailing of me throughout the store, and the ultimate desecration of my privacy in the vulnerable confines of the restroom. Holly's mouth pressed into a thin line, anger flashing in her eyes as I recounted the details. She assured me the police were on their way and that the man would be apprehended if he dared return. I could tell she was raged on my behalf, but her calm presence eased my frayed nerves. After giving my official statement to the officers, I left the store feeling rattled to my core. I spent the next few days jumping at shadows, paranoid I was being watched through my own windows. But I never saw the scrawny man again. Still, I found myself unable to return to that target, the residual trauma too fresh in my mind. I switched to shopping at the location across town, though I could never bring myself to use a public restroom alone again. Even surrounded by people, I felt exposed, vulnerable, like phantom eyes were tracking my every move. I don't know who he was or why he targeted me that day. Maybe an opportunistic creep who got some sick thrill from terrorizing women. Whatever his motives, the wide, unsettling grin stretching his thin lips will haunt me as long as I live. A mask of friendliness hiding depraved intent. Sometimes I still wake in the night, pulse racing as I relive the trauma of that evening. I suppose in some ways, he stole a piece of my soul, the ability to feel truly safe. But I refuse to let him take anything more. With time, I know the wounds will mend, the fear fade, my life will move forward, but I will never shop at Target again. It was a busy Saturday morning at Target. I grabbed a cart and headed inside, ready to tackle my long to-do list. As a single mom, weekends were my only time to get everything done, and I aimed to make the most of this shopping trip. First stop, the clothing section. My daughter Kayla had hit a growth spurt and needed new pairs of jeans. I smiled as I picked through the options, remembering how she had protested the need for new clothes just this morning. My little girl was growing up so fast. With jeans draped over my arm, I paused at the underwear section. Kayla would need new bras soon, though she insisted she was still just a kid. I chuckled to myself, knowing that battle was on the horizon. As I turned down the next aisle, a figure stepped into my path. I startled, nearly running my cart into the man. He was older, hair thinning, with a ratty flannel shirt hanging from his wiry frame. "Oops, sorry about that," he said with a twitchy smile. His eyes dropped to the bras in my hand and lingered there too long. I mumbled an acknowledgement and tried to step around him, skin crawling, but he sidestepped with me, blocking my way. "You have a daughter?" he asked. I couldn't help but notice the sizes. They grow up so fast, don't they? Alarm bells went off in my head. I shoved past him without a word, pulse thudding. Who did this creep think he was talking about my daughter like that? I continued through the store, but my earlier contentment had soured. I could feel his eyes tracking me as I grabbed snacks and school supplies. Every glimpse of him in my periphery put me further on edge. Finally, I decided to try the makeup section to kill some time until he left. But as I browsed lipsticks, that reedy voice spoke up from behind me. "You know, I think a nice pink gloss would look great with your complexion." I whirled around to see the man leering at me, his eyes clouded with ill intent. Fear lanced through me, sharp and cold. "Get the hell away from me," I spat through gritted teeth. "I'm finding security." His expression darkened. "Now don't be like that, sweetheart. I just want to help you pick out some nice makeup for you and your daughter." That was it. I abandoned my cart and bolted, his wheezy laughter echoing behind me. My heart pounded wildly as I fled through the store, one panicked thought in my mind. I needed to get Kayla as far away from this predator as possible. I found a security guard and hurriedly explained what had happened. The man listened grimly and assured me he would handle it. Though still shaken, I managed to finish checking out before rushing home, continually glancing over my shoulder. I hugged Kayla tightly that night, never wanting to let her go. I knew then I would do anything to protect my little girl, no matter what monsters lurked within this harsh world. She was everything to me, and I refused to let creeps like that man at Target extinguish her innocent light. Not now, not ever. The late-night trip to Target was meant to be quick, just a few forgotten ingredients for the baked ziti I was making for book club the next day. But as I wandered the brightly lit yet deserted aisles, an unsettled feeling began gnawing at me. Too late, I realized my phone was dead, depriving me of distraction from the emptiness. The buzz of the freezers and intermittent crackles over the intercom became oddly ominous in the stillness. I just needed to grab ricotta and garlic, and then I could be on my way. Nearing the refrigerated section, I slowed, sensing movement up ahead. A cleaning cart occupied the aisle, but no worker was in sight. As I approached, the hairs on my neck prickled. Something felt off. Steeling myself, I hurried forward to grab the cheese, but as my hand closed around a container, a floor sink beside me gurgled. I jumped, heart seized by instinctive fear. Peering into the dark crawl space beneath, I saw the drain's metal cover shifted aside. Odd, there was no repair work slated for nights according to the signs out front. Then, a scuttling sound arose from the opening. I leapt back, pulse racing, as first one grimy hand, then another crept out along the tiles. They grasped and dragged, slowly revealing a filthy, unkempt man clambering up from below. I stood paralyzed as the disheveled figure unfurled to full height, grinning through a wild, matted beard. Rancid stench wafted off his dirt-caked clothes, making my stomach churn. "Well, well," he rasped, voice gritty and raw. "What do we have here?" Snapping from my horrified daze, I dropped the container with a crash and turned to run, but his hand shot out, catching my wrist in an iron, vice-like grip. I screamed and thrashed, but his hold only tightened. He laughed, foul breath hot on my face as I desperately kicked and flailed. But my efforts barely fazed his wiry strength. Exhausted, I finally sagged in his clutch as his free hand drew a grimy knife from his coat. "Looks like I caught myself a tasty late-night snack," he leered. Blind terror consumed me as I watched the blade rise, glinting under the fluorescent lights, certain I was facing my end. When suddenly shouting arose, accompanied by pounding footsteps. In a blur, the man was tackled to the ground by 2 security officers, his knife sent skittering away across the tiles. They wrestled him into cuffs as I looked on, shaking. The apparent transient had been hiding in the store after hours and attempted to ambush me, but thankfully, my screams had alerted staff, who came rushing to my aid in the nick of time. After giving a statement, still in shock, I left with police escort. I've since installed security cameras outside my home and no longer go on late-night solo trips. But I'll never forget that predatory grin stretching wide in the shadows of the empty aisles, waiting to strike.